like how the idea for team chemistry was evolving during this magnificent run that the Giants were on really over the last 12 years or so.
Yeah, they won 3 World Series, over the course of 5 years. And it was this, again, sort of a jumble of a team, but they had a lot of really great young players. And, they come in, and I'm sure you've seen this in, the NFL and college locker rooms, that, a guy coming in for the first time, he's finally in a big, like in baseball, finally a big league, and they come in and their eyes are like saucers, but they're also walking around like they're on the prison yard. What am I, how do things work here? I don't know. And then somebody comes over and, I would see these interactions. So like, you'd see Buster Posey, the biggest star on the team, or Hunter Pence, who was also a big star on the team, come over to that rookie and put his arm around him and say, "You're exactly the guy we need right now. So glad you're here. Come on, let's go. You're going to be great." And that rookie's whole body changes. His face relaxes. His voice is not a little squeak coming out anymore. And he feels like he's invited to belong. He's told he's ready. And when Buster Posey or Hunter Pence or somebody like that tells you that, you believe them. And like this kid named Matt Duffy, he went out and, he still had acne, on his face and weighed 10 pounds. And he goes out there and he kills it right from the start. And when I asked him, months later, I said, Matt, God, we rarely see, he said, they said I was ready. And so I was ready. And then that's that power of belief. And that goes to, these two sides of performance, which is the analytics, because it does inform strategy and shifts and, all of those things that are so important because it pushes to the surface what's actually happening. Because we don't see that on a day-to-day basis, right? We don't remember every ball that was hit to right field, facing a lefty on Tuesdays, so it's like we see trends that you can't see otherwise, analytics. But what those guys, guys like Michael Lewis and others, what they don't get, and it's mind-boggling to me that they don't get this, is that it's actually human beings carrying out that brilliant strategy. They need to be motivated. They need to be committed. They need to bond. They need to trust each other, because otherwise you're just going off a sheet. And that's not how human beings work. That's not how sports work. That's not how businesses work. So the cutting edge teams are not the ones that were from Moneyball. That's old now. It's the ones that integrate, totally understand human nature and the analytics. They absolutely need both. And it seems to me just common sense that that's true.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, I saw this too in my experiences. As I was saying, as a young 22-year-old, I was like, how are we not talking about this? Like, this doesn't seem right to me. But, it just shows that there are kind of like, there's two sides of this aisle where there are people like, Michael Lewis, obviously somebody that I respect greatly, especially for his work that he's done in athletics. But it is very interesting because there's coaches in the same vein that everybody looks up to, that I look up to, but yet don't see it the same way. They see it as purely a talent-based thing. And I think what you're talking about, 20 years ago, analytics was a competitive advantage. Not everybody was utilizing it. But now there is so much analytics all over the place. Mm-hmm. Like bettors have the analytic information. Anybody that's doing fantasy football or fantasy sports has that access to that information. And I really wrote my book, and it seems like you're kind of mirroring the same message, which is character is the new competitive advantage. And the mm-hmm. teams that don't fully integrate it, like you mentioned, really are definitely like not giving themselves every opportunity to achieve that highest level of performance. And, I know in your book you talk about like how team chemistry can't create talent, and I talk in my book about the talent paradox, which is talent is essential to success, but success is not determined by talent. In other words, there's all of these other things, these intangible characteristics that make up those great teams and those elite performers. Talk about where you saw that in kind of the evolution of the idea for this book. Obviously, you were around a lot of the great Giants teams. Were you seeing any teams that maybe were more talented than others, but yet couldn't quite reach that pinnacle of success, or maybe fail to reach their potential?
Right. Yeah. And that is, I mean, the greatest example, I mean, I wasn't part of it, obviously, but the greatest example was, and I don't have my information in front of me, I'm not a numbers person, was, I think it was the second or third dream team at the Olympics, American Dream Team. And they finished with the bronze medal. They were head and shoulders over every single team, but they did not connect. There was just this dysfunction on that team. And so talent didn't matter then. Talent does matter, but also we only think of talent as what they do on the field, right? We don't think of what they're doing in the clubhouse and in the locker room. And what happens in the clubhouse and the locker room informs performance on the field. So, for instance, I have a big chapter in my book on Johnny Gomes, a journeyman player, lifetime like 213 or 220 or something, batting average. And he bounced from team to team because he really wasn't a great player. But a pattern emerged during Johnny Gomes's career, and that was his teams won. So time after time after time, his teams won. And you're like, okay, is that a coincidence? Well, soon, of course, his teammates recognize that, okay, Johnny Gomes is the guy. He's having a huge impact on all of us. Well, what's that impact? How do you have an impact where he almost single-handedly spreads this contagion of trust, bonding, and 100% commitment? And it's not a commitment to a goal. It's the commitment to each other. And if you're committed to each other 100%, you play better. It's just how our brains work, right? So like, for instance, and I'm going to go back to Johnny Gomes, but Jake Peavy, Cy Young pitcher, played for the Giants for a few years after his Cy Young. And he is that guy who's on the mound that every team wants. He's the snorter and the stomper, and he's, just thrumming with passion and drive and grit. And he's on the mound. And I said, okay, so I'm talking to him, I'm interviewing him for the book. I said, I know you're a huge, huge proponent of team chemistry, and how it helps everybody. I said, so I'm watching you on the mound and you're giving 100% already. And you can't give even 101%, it just doesn't exist. I said, so why would team chemistry matter to you? Because you're already playing at your peak. And he had the line of the book, said, my teammates summon a fight in me I can't willingly summon for myself. And it blew me away. I said, that's it. And in all the research that I did and continue to do on the human brain and our physiology and how we respond, that's exactly what happens. There's this power of relationship that summons more from us than what we are. And one neuroscientist explained it to me. He said, human beings are open loop creatures. Okay, what do you mean by that? He said, we're born with open loops that only other people can complete. You cannot complete it for yourself. And, the studies of babies, the orphans who died, in last turn of the century, Eastern Europe. They were trying to, these babies were separated into their, little cribs. And these are newborns. And to stop the spread of disease, the caretakers of all these newborns in these orphanages were told to not touch them or, breathe on them, anything more than you absolutely have to. So just changing them, feeding them, washing them. And they even put up plastic sheets between each of them. Well, what turned out was more babies died than ever before from disease. They died. Nobody knew why they were dying. And in one orphanage, every single baby died. And only 40 years later, when it was researched, like what happened here, what continues to happen in these kinds of situations, that it was babies, like the rest of us, but babies especially, cannot survive without human connection. The touch, the cooing, the cuddling, all of that is so that completes their open loop. And it continues for the rest of our lives. Our open loops are never completely closed, right? People are always out there. It's other people that make us whole and bring out our best.